Hi guys, I'm Eric and welcome to HTML and CSS Crash Course. In this very brief tutorial, we'll look at HTML and CSS, as I mentioned, some theoretical aspects at the very beginning, and then we'll jump into practice and we'll make this small portfolio type personal website, which is quite a nice project in itself. However, we will focus on learning the basics and some introductory aspects of HTML and CSS, how both the languages are written, the syntax, the usage. We'll look at some theoretical aspects at the very beginning. Moreover, we'll take a look at how to use some outside resources in order to give you very brief, although solid fundamentals you can use in order to start learning JavaScript and maybe some modern JavaScript library or framework like React or Angular, because all of these use HTML and CSS. And not always you are introduced to HTML and CSS alone. So when you start working on JavaScript projects, a lot of people, a lot of courses require you to know some basic fundamentals, but where can you get the knowledge? And the answer is simple from this video. So, well, basically you're welcome, right? All right, so without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Okay, so as I mentioned, we'll start with this theoretical introduction. So let's look at HTML and CSS. At first, HTML. So what is HTML basically? The abbreviation stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and it's a language that is used to create and describe the structure of a website. Basically, it consists of tags that describe the elements and the layout of all those elements within the website, and it's something that's been already standardized. We are currently using HTML version 5, which has gone through a lot of introductions of new sets of features. We've got two types of tags within HTML, because HTML is basically tags that build a website. We've got two types of tags, and the first one is the one that we see on the upper one. So basically something that consists of so-called opening and closing tag, and you've got content inside. And the other one is so-called self-closing tag. Let's look at the first one, so the normal, the big one. So we've got opening tag, as I mentioned at the beginning. Then we've got closing tag. And in the middle, we have content of the HTML tag. So as you can see, both of the tags, so opening and closing one, they are described with those angle braces, both opening and closing. However, closing tag, after the opening angle brace, we have a forward slash. That's important to notice. As far as self-closing tag is concerned, we only have one tag, which begins with angled brace and is concluded with angled brace, however with a forward slash again. But as you can see, you have no content inside. Then we have the name of the element that the tag is correlated to. So basically the tag describes any element that you will see on the website. Here, as an example, we have an element called main, which basically describes the main part of the content. There are numerous, tens if not hundreds of elements that HTML you can use within HTML, so the tags like main, div, body, head, like really numerous. Truth to be told, not only you don't have to memorize all of them, you don't have to memorize even most of them, because you'll never see or use some of them. One of the most important ones are head, body, they always appear, div, span, but well, we'll cover that in the practical part. So you've got the element name, right? For example, we are describing the tag that describes the element main, so the main part of the content. Then we have some attribute. Not always does the tag have attributes. They don't have to have them. They might have, they don't have to. Here, our main element has an attribute called class. That's one of the most common and also, yeah, very, very important attribute that you can find. Attribute or property, those are synonyms. So we have this attribute called class, and it has a value, the name of the class. It is called stuff. And notice that whenever we have an attribute, in order to specify some value, some are like valueless, so they don't have any value. So not that they actually, lack a value. It's only because you've got attributes like autofocus, which means that the element will get autofocused, as the name implies, by the browser. So it doesn't really need to have any value, and it doesn't even allow you to add any value. But with stuff like class, which defines how the element is styled, basically, you have, so like class, maybe some content values or whatever. So you have the equal sign, and after that you have a pair of quotation marks. So between those quotation marks, you have the value, which is basically some text. Here we have stuff. It's a name of a class that we'll use to style this element, but we'll look at it later. So the document basically is, any website is a document as far as HTML is concerned. And as we said, HTML is tags, and the document consists of tags. And as you can see, here we have four types of tags. First one is, well, technically it's self-closing. However, it's a very unique tag that it doesn't have this / at the end, but it doesn't really matter. It just specifies that we are using HTML object. Then we have the most important tag, which is HTML. It's the tag that contains everything else that's on the website. And here we specified two important parts of the website, which is one called head and the other is called body. And notice that within the HTML, we've got a set of tags, so opening tag here and closing tag at the end. So in the content part of HTML pair of tags, we have this head tag, also opening and closing. Inside we've got some config stuff. And then we've got body tag, and so opening one and closing one with its own content. Head tag. Every page has a head tag. Stuff that goes inside is those are also HTML tags, like title. Basically anything that describes the configuration of a site. So title, description, anything that will appear in the search results when you search for the website in Google or any other search engine, the icon that will appear on the tab in your browser, stuff like that. Maybe importing styling sheets, that's important stuff. Importing stuff outside of the website, for example, fonts from Google Fonts or other source. So basically, not technically nothing that we'll see, nothing visual goes into head. It's configuration and like option customization of the website. And then we've got body, which is actual content that we see. So for the most of the part, we will work in the body or within the body tags on the website. Head we configure at the beginning, and then, or maybe throughout the the work, but mostly we work on the body tag. Okay, part 2, CSS. Again, abbreviation. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And it's a style language that defines how the HTML document and its elements are displayed, rendered by the browser. So basically, HTML describes what we have on the page, and CSS then defines how it should look, basically. So the structure of CSS is that CSS consists of rule sets. So while in HTML we had tags that are either self-closing or they have a closing counterpart, here we have rule sets. So we have those pieces of code which will look like this. So we have something at the very beginning, then those curly braces, something inside, and then a curly brace to enclose it, and that's called a rule set. At the beginning of the rule set we have a selector, and in this example the selector is written in the form of a full stop and then some word, this example stuff. And if you remember, in our example tag we had a class attribute and its value was stuff, and basically that stuff and this stuff it's the same. One relates to the other. So basically, whatever we write in this rule set is being applied to this tag main, because this tag main has an attribute of a class, which is a CSS attribute, and is being linked by the name of the CSS class, which is stuff. And every CSS class, the selector of the rule set. So here we've got the rule set, a set of rules, well, basically as the name implies, and we select that those rules should apply to anything, any tag, HTML tag, that uses this class. And we know it's a class because it begins with a full stop. It always begins with a full stop. So obviously we can write something different like full stop styling, and then we'll write class equal to, and then quotation marks, and inside we'll write styling, and it will be the same. So it will still be applied to this tag. But in order to give some variation, that we apply one type of styling to some part of the elements, different types of styling to different, we use, for example, multiple classes. Yeah, so we'll have multiple selectors, and also we can use the same selector, so the same class, to different elements. So elements can share classes, we can mix classes, we'll see that later. Selector can be also pure. So as a selector we can also use the name of the element. So in this case we've got main, right? So you can see it then will apply to every main element. Because if we use class, it will apply to every element that uses this class attribute with the value of stuff. But if we use selector, that's the name of the element, then it will apply to every element. Actually, in the case of main element, the documentation suggests that you should have only one main element. So this selector will be kind of unique, but if you use something other like paragraph, let's say, then it will be applied to every paragraph, unless you specify some other rules, which we'll take a look at later. Yet another selector can be using ID. So for example, a class, a tag can have an attribute ID, which is shortened for identifier, probably, which has the value of whatever you choose. I chose a word unique. It doesn't have to be that. Well, it's basically whatever we write. So it has an ID of unique, and then we select by an ID. ID is always unique. So whatever you write, you cannot put it anywhere else. So basically, if you use a selector, if your selector is by ID, first of all, we need to start it with a hash. That's how basically the engine of the browser it knows that we want to choose an ID as a selector. So we started with a hash sign, and then the name of the ID. It just scans through the whole document and looks for the element tag that has ID property, and the value is like, you know, the same. And because ID is always unique within the website, so it will always apply only to one element. If you want to use that, you can use that. To be honest, it's rarely used. Okay, but then within the rule set, we have declarations. So basically rules, yeah, a set of rules. A rule is called declaration as well. You can have as many as you want. Here we have got 3. You can have 1. You can have 0. Although it will be displayed as a maybe not error, but warning that you should have a class that has no rules. You can have 3000. You have as many as you want. However, the more you have, the more it might, doesn't have to, it might impact performance and stuff like that. So we have declaration. Declaration consists of property, in this case color, or the other one is font size margin. So property, then we've got a colon, and we've got a value followed by a semicolon. That's important, that's a part of the syntax. You can't write comma, you have to write semicolon at the end, otherwise we'll get an error. So that's the syntax, that's how then later the code is interpreted. That's it. So let's now go and look at how the code is actually written, and we'll create a small website. Okay, so we start with desktop. And one of the most important points of this tutorial is to show you that you can actually create HTML. Well, basically you can create a website using HTML, CSS, no JavaScript, no, not at all. And we'll not use any profound software for that. So basically you can actually go to your library computer, which basically should allow you only to use WordPad. Maybe not even WordPad, Notepad, basic generic Windows Notepad. If you're using Mac, then also Notes app. So yeah, basically we start with nothing and we will create something, all right? So what we need to have is an empty folder. Create an empty folder. I created mine directly on the desktop. Maybe it's not the best practice, but who cares? It's a small project. I have it on the desktop. I call the folder project. It's not really important. We'll now create a text file. However, it's important. Delete the whole name plus extension. We'll call it index.html. Now we have a pop-up prompt that says in Polish. You probably don't know Polish. I do. I will translate for you. It asks us whether we are sure that we want to change the extension, and basically yes, I do, because I know that if I create an HTML file, text file, it can be opened by a browser, and by default you can see it already is being associated with Google Chrome, which we will use later on, but well, not yet. So, however, if we open it, we can see that it displays something already, right? However, how to go from this to that, we will see in a second. Let's actually we will leave it here. I'll put it here, but what I also want to do is open it using obviously I have Visual Studio, I have Visual Studio Code. We don't want to use that. We want to use Notepad. So we have already opened our Notepad, and in order not to go back to this folder, we can create another file, text file as well. Create, we'll call it styles.css. index.css. Again, yes. And we'll open it using Notepad as well. We'll keep it here. This one we don't need, so we'll collapse it. And basically, let's look at the HTML. If you write something like hello world, well, we need to save it and then we need to update the website. We already have something. However, that's actually, you know, we can't specify anything unless we use some HTML tags, which we have just learned about. So Grammarly, not really useful here. Yeah, hello, comma, world, exclamation mark, it says Grammarly. So actually you can already see why people use IDEs, meaning the fancy software that allows you to do fancy stuff with your code and basically automates a lot of tasks. For example, we have to manually save the file in Notepad and we have to manually refresh the page in the browser. But, well, who cares? All right, so let's delete that and let's write whatever we need to. First of all, we start with the most important tag, which defines doc type HTML. And we'll close that tag. And HTML and HTML closing tag. All right, so now we have already two tags, right? The most important tag, HTML, everything goes inside that tag. We'll write head and we'll close it with head. And then we'll write body and we'll close it with body. Oh, I need to learn how to type, I think. Okay, so we already have something. At the very beginning, I don't want to name index.html, which is the name of the file. I don't want it to be displayed on the browser tab. So let's define a title. So title will be, actually there's my first page. It's a it's a tag that this tag has an opening and a closing tag. So already, as you can see, we have updated our title of our, well, let's say new website. So it's already cool that we can, with typing only a few characters, we already started doing something that has an impact. So as far as head tag is concerned, we'll do two more things. One we'll do right now and the other we'll do slightly later. And important thing is to, you know what, we'll do this important thing, but later on. So I mentioned that there is a tag called main. It doesn't specify how the page looks. It just specifies what is the most important part of the website. It's not really for us, it's more for the bots. So like Google search engine, other search engines as well, they have their bots that crawl over the website or the whole internet and find your website and then crawl over the website. And then they scan the website for any information that might be useful for the customers, so that they can then display the website in the search results whenever you search for something that's connected to the content of your website. And using tags that have semantic meaning like main, we can help those bots see what's the most important part of the website. So we'll use those semantic tags whenever possible. And we'll also use the tags that have no meaning at all. They are just there to somehow create structure and organization. So if we are working with Visual Studio Code, for example, automatically we would have in the indentation, basically meaning that the code will look like this, so that it's easier for us. I will not indent the whole, I will just leave it like this, because then it will be easier for us to read the code. But I think it's pretty okay for the moment. I can enlarge the font so that you can see it better. Alright, so we have our main tag, and let's create a first section. Yet another thing, using ID, those tags would autocomplete, they would create themselves. I mean, the closing tag will be created as soon as I created the first tag, which is also something that's very convenient, but yep, we are doing it old style. Okay, so what have I done? I have, let's work this way. I have created an article that is inside a section. Nothing really happened. I have to say, nothing happened. However, if we now go into our page, press right mouse button, and then go into inspect, let's imagine it says inspect, or we go into settings, more tools, and then tools for developers. That's really the same thing. And we go into elements, we can already see our layout. So we've got doc type HTML, which is this tag. Then we've got head. So this head, obviously everything is inside HTML. So we already see that whatever we write here and save, it's being updated and put on the page, which I think is already cool. That no knowledge, I mean, already, well, just some tiny bit of knowledge, and we can already create something that is, well, we are programming a website already. So we created a main element, then we created section, then we created an article. Why? You'll see in a moment. Inside the article, let's write something. So we'll use h1 tag, and this time I will write something like this. Hi, I'm Eric. And we'll close it. What is h1? I'll close the developer stuff. Update. h1 is a header. We've got different types of headers from h1 till h6, and basically that's a pre-built set of styling. If we didn't apply any custom CSS styling, we'd have to rely on stuff like h1, P, which stands for paragraph, and we'll write this is my, let's close it, save. Well, not really the most beautiful website, I think you'll agree with me. So let's make it look nice. But to do that, we'll need to write some rule sets in our CSS file. So let's go into main, and remember we use attribute called class, then equal sign, apostrophes, and we'll call it container. Oh yeah. Basically we could also use main and then curly brackets, or full stop container and curly brackets, and basically whatever goes into curly brackets in those two things will have the same effect, because we either apply it to this element because of the main element of the type of the element, or we select by the name of the class. So basically, but we'll go with the class because it's a good practice. With main element, it's something we could also use. However, if we, for example, want to apply something to a section and then we add another section, it will also be applied to that. We might want that, we might not want that. So container class, let's add something that will see the effect of our styling already. So let's use a declaration of background color property, and the value, let's say it's black. Save, update, nothing happens. Why? Well, technically our website opened HTML file, index.html file. And if you go through the file, we'll see that there is, apart from the name of the class, there is no way, no link to the file of styles.css. So we need to link it, we need to import it, and we do it in the head section. So that's the important thing I mentioned. So we will use tab link relative or link rel style sheet, so that we know it's a CSS, and then href, so basically the reference to the source, to the path, and it's relative. So we'll use styles.css, and then we self-close the tag. We save, we update, and we already see something. We see the main object element. Let's go into inspect again. So now I'll briefly show you the beauty of the DevTools. So maybe you've noticed that this part of the browser is in Polish, however the DevTools are in English. I think that I could set them to Polish, but I don't want to. Anyway, we look at the body tag. So inside the body tag, as in our HTML3, you have main element. Notice that when we hover over element in the inspector mode, it highlights it on the screen. So we can see that the body tag has some orange outline. We'll look at it later. So we have main element that we applied our background color to, and it's actually black. And why does it have this size and dimensions? Because our main class element, main element that has class of container, has only the section, then the article, then there's this heading of hi, I'm Eric, and then the paragraph of this is my personal website. And those two elements are, maybe let's change it to blue so that we can actually see what's inside. Yeah, not the best green. Yeah, better. So now that we see that this element by default it's being stretched to the full width of the website. However, not really full width. There is some margin around. We don't want that margin, so let's get rid of it. By default, browsers have stuff that define what is the basically styling of some elements. For example, body tag by default has a margin. It is in this case 8 pixels. As you can see, 8 pixels of margin. So let's write body. So we will select the body and we'll use a property called margin. We'll set it to 0. Save, update, no margin. There is still some margin at the top, however it stems from the header. So header has a margin on its own. The same applies to paragraph. And we apply the styling to the elements and something that's between them, because we have this only main section. Doesn't matter. We'll get rid of this color and we'll actually try to put this stuff in the very middle. So it's 2022 already, close to 2023. we have modern tools in CSS and HTML. We will use modern tools. I will not show how to do it vanilla and legacy style in HTML and CSS. I'll show you how it's being done and used nowadays in the modern way. We have something called the display property. We set the display property to flex. Flexbox, because that's how it's basically the name. It's a set of rules that's built in nearly all modern browsers. Maybe not Internet Explorer, but it's being redacted, fortunately. So it's a set of rules that's built in that govern very specific behavior of elements that are inside that element. So our section, our article, our H1 and P. So display flex, we'll see later how it behaves. So display flex, before that, actually the order of the properties of the rule sets, it does matter in some cases if you have similar rules. For example, let's look at body. We have margin 0, meaning all margins. So top, bottom, left, right, all margins are set to 0. If after setting all margins to 0, we set margin hyphen right to 10 pixels and save it and then refresh. Let's give this background green again. Background. So as you can see, first we applied margin 0, and then we applied margin right, which means that all the margins are set to 0. Then we set margin right to 10 pixels. So basically, the later overrides the previous ones, and vice versa. Well, the latter overrides something that's been written before, right? Because they are being read by the compiler in the descending order, so from the top to bottom. So basically, if you write something that overrides something that's up or above, it will get overridden, and well, that's how it works. But with also of the stuff, the order is not important because they are like independent of each other. So yeah, let's keep this background green for the moment. Save update. Display flex. Let's set the width of the screen to 100 pixels, sorry, 100%, and height 100%. So we have the properties width and height of 100%, and what I wanted to achieve is have that container object span all over the desktop. I mean the website, whatever is inside the browser, however big it is. And as far width works, so it is 100% of the view. However, height, not really. It shrinks down to cover whatever is inside the element, but it doesn't go above that. So in order to how to understand it basically, so height 100%, it spans to the 100% of the parent element. So when we apply our body, we apply our class, CSS class to main element, and we mention 100%, then the percentage is calculated based on whatever are the dimensions of the parent element. And in this case, it's the body. So body by default, it spans it stretches to the full width of the browser window, but it doesn't apply to height. On height it shrinks to contain whatever's inside and nothing more. So we can change that by setting, we could basically set it to, for example, 1000 pixels, and it would work. Also, it goes, after some point, it goes beyond the whatever we have in our browser. So let's say that the browser height at the moment is 900 pixels. So as you can see, we have this scroll bar, so we can scroll the additional 100. When you go above 1000 pixels of height, we'll have this white bar. So any fixed height will not work. I mean, in some cases it will, in some cases it won't. So it's not really a good thing. But we can specify so-called 100 VH, VH, which stands for view heights units. So basically it's when it comes to the image window, one view height equals to 1% of height of the window, whole window. I mean the visible part of the window. Do not, counting the navbar, the only the visible usable part of the browser window. So yeah, we have to save, and now no matter what are the dimensions, it works. Width 100% works, so that's fine. Right, so now let's go back and try to center this element vertically and horizontally. So we set display flex property, and we can specify more properties of, or like sub properties of the flexbox display style we applied. And let's start with flex orientation, flex direction, and we set it to column. Well, nothing will change, because basically if we set it to flex direction column, it means our elements will be stacked from top to bottom. So basically, let's go to inspect again, and one is above the other. If we set it to row, for example, then they are, oh yeah, right, one more thing. Nothing will change, because by default we have display block. As you can see, P is this, the paragraph display blocks. Block, heading is display block, article display block, section is display block. If we remove those two and we were left with only H1 and P elements inside the main, let's save it. Now when we update it, we can see that the flex direction row now specifies that those two elements are aligned one next to each other from left to right. We could specify what's the order, what's the order of the elements, and stuff like that. But let's go back and reintroduce those elements, so section and article, and maybe after that we'll specify first justify center, and we see that row, we want column. So when we specify that the flex direction is column, then the axis Y, or the vertical one, is the main one. And when we use the justify content property, we specify how the elements should be aligned along the main axis, which is vertical one. So vertically we set them to center, justify content center. And then we have the other additional axis, which is horizontal in this manner. And in order to align items using the other axis, we will use align items property, and also set it to, Jesus, And now we have centered our div. There is this common joke that previously, before introduction of Flexbox, it was kind of difficult to center any element for that matter. Now it takes what, 4 lines of code, basically 3 if we take that, because if we center both axes, both the main one and the additional one, we don't really need to specify which is the main one, if it makes sense. So those 5 lines or 6, and you can center any element inside any other element. So basically, modern CSS, making miracles since whenever. I don't want the green background color. I want something different. And to be honest, I have already prepared a color, and well, we have different types, different ways of specifying colors in CSS. One is by using name, and there are a lot of names included. So basically, we have a lot of colors that are, implemented inside browsers, like the obvious ones, which we know, but also, for example, Plume. I like this color; it's kind of pink. Tomato, which is reddish, something between red and orange one. Gold. Basically, there are many different color properties. I mean, color attribute values that we can use. But also we can specify any color actually using one of a few methods. One of which is using the hash value of a color. And since I know a few, I will use this one. So I will use F5, 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 and as you can see, it's white, but not really white. And I really like this because it's a great color for background. And the idea is that you can have an element, which we'll have in a moment, that has a white background, and because of this whitish accent in the main background, that small element will stand out. But that will be in a moment. So we have our container item, container class. So now let's look at the section. So what we want to do is, if you remember, we have this website. So the idea is that we have a body element which spans all over the website. Then we'll have the main section, which will cover the whole content that's on this website. We'll have yet another section outside the main element, which will be responsible for this, I think, cool looking background of this infinite, not really infinite, but seemingly infinite, let's say infinitely deep corridor, hole, tunnel, tour. But yeah, with this main section, main element, we'll have 2 sections. One section will cover those navigation panels, items, we'll call them cards, well, basically articles. And then we'll have another section for the for those recommendations, comments, however you want to call them. So we have a section for that, and inside that section we want to have 3 elements, 3 cards, which will be article items. So maybe let's specify the article item for the moment. So we'll add a class here. We'll name the class card. And the section, we can add a class and give it the name cards, plural, grammar. So we can already add those 2 selectors. Save and see that nothing changes. However, if you go into inspector, maybe not section, but no, it will not show because the classes are empty. So we'll need to, oh, sorry, we need to update this one as well. Now in the inspector, you can see that the main class has a main element, sorry, has a class container already applied. Section has a class cards, and article has a class card, singular, already applied. However, well, there's nothing in that. The rule set is empty, which is something that we will focus on in the moment. So first of all, in cards, we will copy this one. We'll put it here. However, we'll make the flex direction row because we want them to be displayed as a row, so from left to right. Well, technically cards is done. Let's look like a card, singular. So let's start with giving it a background color. And do we want to change it to white? I don't remember. I'll have to check. Actually, it's not white. It's still the same color, but it doesn't really matter. We will. Doesn't matter. Let's give it some dimensions, shall we? So width 300 pixels, height 100, 200, 240 pixels. I think it will work well, and it will not change anything, although it has the dimensions I inputted, so the width and height is already there, as you can see. However, it's not really, visible. So let's make it visible. We could add a border. So there is a property called border, and there are a few things that we can specify. For example, line width, which is 2 pixels, type of line, solid, and color, tomato. So we should have a solid line. So yeah, solid line, width of 2 pixels, red color around the border of our element. It looks like crap, so we'll remove it. But basically, you can sometimes, depending on the design you want to achieve, we will want to do the border with a shadow, and there is a nice property that's called box shadow. And the box shadow takes we'll need 4 values at least, and it will be first will be 0 pixels, then we'll have 10 pixels, 35 pixels, and 8 pixels. So those are values that specify how the box shadow is positioned, it looks like. So first is X offset, the other is Y offset. Then we have the spread, and then we have some other property, I don't really remember. So 8 pixels, and we need to specify the color. Let's write black for the moment. It's already starting to look as like something, but using solid color like black is not really a good idea. The good practice is to use colors that have very low opacity, especially for shadows, in order to get a good look. So we could write the color of the shadow using, we want to use black color, but black with some smaller opacity. And again, there are a few ways to do that, to introduce this black color. First will be writing an hex value, which will be 000000. That's pure black. And if we want to add the alpha channel, then we need to specify one more set of 2 digits in a hexadecimal system. Well, basically 4 I think would be fine, and that shadow actually looks nice. However, this is not really legible. Colors like this, sometimes you know hex values. But if you have better IDE, then you can like toggle between different types of representations of the same color, because color is basically three or four channels, right? So red, green, and blue. So for example, if we set it to that, and then we will set the first two as FF, which is the two highest hexadecimal blah 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 values, will get red. If we set them to 0 0 and set the middle ones to FF, we'll have full green, and etc. But it's really not legible. Maybe it's a compact way of saving colors, but it's not really legible. However, we can use other way of writing, RGBA, so red, green, blue, alpha again, and then we put parentheses, and we have to provide 4 values. So to achieve pure black with 100% opacity, would write it like that. So red, green, blue, alpha, then parentheses, and inside parentheses 4 numbers, and each number goes from 0 to 255. So basically it's equivalent of FF in hexadecimal. And as the last one we have 1, because you can alpha we specify in percentages, and that's the same. That's black. We don't want black. We want something that has 0.1 opacity or 0.2, and voila, that's pretty subtle shadow, and it looks so much better. One more thing, nobody likes generic fonts, especially serif fonts. We want sans serif fonts. So now we'll show you a trick how to apply a styling using a selector that specifies it should apply to every element that's on the page. Totally everyone. Star or asterisk, if you like. Basically, we could say font size equals to 5 pixel, save, update, and everything, both heading and paragraph will be set to that. That's not something we want. We want to specify font family property, and here we have to specify something like Sego, well, basically sans serif, and if we update, we'll see font family is sans serif, and that's technically something that's very default. By default, it takes sans serif font that we have installed. This one is either Arial or maybe it's something different. It will depend. However, the nice thing is it will take the default sans serif font of your device. So on Apple, it could be, I don't remember, Tahoma probably, or other fonts. But basically, depending on the device, it will take the default one, which is the default sans serif. If you don't have something installed that I would specify here, it will go back to the default one, the system value. So yeah, sans serif fonts are the modern typesets. However, again, it depends on the usage. So some fonts will look better in some other circumstances. Okay, so we've got our card, and again, we can copy this thing. However, yeah, column. So we have already centered it. And if you take this article and copy it twice, save, we have 3 items. It's not really looking very well. So let's add some value called margin. And let's specify margin as 16 pixels. Update, and they are spread in a better way. They do not overlap over each other. The worst thing here is that you have to indent everything manually. All right, so let's put here my projects. These are the projects I have been working on. Let's close this tag and contact me. You can reach me all the time at the following email address. Oops. And colon here. Save, update. All right. I don't like the fact that the text, first of all, it's not really a good UI if you center all the text, especially small paragraphs like that. It's better. The readability is great if you leave it like it is now. But let's add padding. Padding is a value that will specify some. It's best to describe it as an inner margin. So margin is something that's outside. So it specifies what's the distance from what's the smallest distance this object should have to the outer elements. And padding is basically the inside border, inside margin between the parent element, I mean this actual element, so article, and the child elements. So let's state padding at 16 pixel, save, update. And yeah, already it's looking nice. However, I would like to have padding that's slightly higher value on the horizontal axis, and on the vertical axis, well, it can stay like this because we'll be adding some buttons in a moment. So let's keep it like this. But we can padding, margin, and other values like that are actually properties that are a shorthand for sub-properties. For example, padding. I already mentioned margin right or margin left. So we have also padding left. And for example, let's say it should be 32 pixels and padding right should be 32 pixels as well. Save, update, and it already is looking better. However, there's a problem. I see a problem at least. This is not very elegant way of writing that code. And actually there is a better way to do that. We'll remove that. And please remember that in case, in situation of padding margin, you can write one value and then write space and another value. And it's understood like the first value applies to the vertical axis and the other value applies to the horizontal axis. So now this is a shorthand for the previous 3 lines. Basically, this is shorthand version of 4 lines. So padding top equals 16, padding bottom equals 16, left and right equals 32 pixels. So nothing changed because that's basically the same. So we already have something that's working nice. And as you can see, those headings do not align with each other. And we could technically use a property, for example, justify content. We could give a property, for example, space between. And now, as you can see, the items are being relocated so that they fill the whole space along the main axis, which is vertical, and then they basically spread the space evenly between all the items. We have two, so there is only one block of space. If we added one more paragraph here, then this one will be in the middle. I mean, it's not technically in the middle because the spacings are equal, so it doesn't really necessarily mean it will be in the middle of the whole element, but well, you get the idea. And so we'll remove that one, and actually we will go back to this one. Oh, you know what, we'll keep it. Now let's add a button. I mean, let's add buttons to every card. So we'll update this one, and we have a HTML tag called button, and this one was let's talk, can be that, and we'll add here projects, C projects, and he will be contact me or email. And we have a button, and the button is working. It's we can use it already, but it looks like crap. So let's add to every button a class. We'll call it maybe not button, but oh yeah, we can call it button. It doesn't really matter. We'll add this to every button. Okay, so we'll add this class button. I mean, yeah, class called button. Let's add it after the card selector. So full stop button, and let's specify that the width is 100%. Height is 50 pixels. It's quite a lot, but will be all right. Then we'll have margin. No, not really. Border radius. Border radius. Yeah, height 50 pixels. Okay, we'll specify the color. So background color will be, I already have a value prepared, which is this something like violet, purple, whatever, and it's B24 EFF. And actually we can already see how it's looking. I don't really like this border. So by default, button has a border. That's kind of interesting. We don't want a border, so we'll specify border and the value none. All right. What's more, we'll specify border radius to be 5 pixels. So we'll have a slightly curly edges. That's already looking nice. And now we can actually, within this class, so you can see the button has, we have the selector called also button, and we have a content inside, email, for example, or C projects, whatever. And we are not really, maybe let's make it smaller a bit. So we can't really, we have no CSS class to obtain or to assign any styling to that element, the content element. We could add some, you know, paragraph tag, but it's really will get messy. And actually, when it comes to text, we can use the parent class, which is button, to shape the styling of the content element, and we'll use property called color. So surprisingly, it's just simple as that, color, and let's specify it's purely white, so hashtag with right white, white, and voila, already looking better. But let's make the text slightly bigger. So font size equals 18 pixels, and also we can specify the font weight to be 600. Font weight basically specifies what subset of the font we are using, slightly heavier. For example, the 400 for most fonts is the default, which is currently, we can, well, 600, 500, let's keep it fixed, 600, and maybe 60 pixels, slightly smaller. I think that's whichever you like, you can choose. Let's stick with that. But now our buttons do nothing, and that's no good. So let's add a property, and let's call it button, selector, and now we can specify what is the behavior. Oh well, sorry, I haven't saved that, that's why. Oh, it still doesn't work. So we'll use a selector called button, and we will add a so-called pseudo selector, hover, and for the moment we are specifying styling for button class, elements that button class applies to, whenever they are hovered on. So whenever you have a your mouse button or pointer on the element, this styling will be applied. So let's add, let's see how it looks. So let's add scale element 1.1 add, and let's see that now whenever we hover over the element, it gets bigger, right? Likewise, we can specify whenever the button is active, meaning it's pressed on. So we'll use active pseudo selector. We'll specify scale 0.9. Basically, it should shrink. So when I click, it shrinks, right? So you have this feedback that you clicked, but it looks really clunky, doesn't it? So we can add something in the button class selector. Actually, I like it very much. It's so-called transition. So basically, maybe without explaining what it does, because it's pretty self-explanatory, I'll write it, transition, yeah, and specify that it applies to all elements. Yes, transition, all elements. 0.2 seconds is the duration of every transition. So no matter what you want to animate, it will the transition will take 0.2 seconds. And then there is a property defining what's the change. So for example, we can say it's linear, meaning that it will change at the same rate all the time. You can have ease in or ease out, meaning it will get fast at the beginning and then ease out, so slow down. The rate of the change will slow down towards the end of the animation. Or ease in, meaning it will be it will start slower and then get faster, or is in out. Is in out, meaning it will start slower, then get quicker, and then slower at the end, which is, I think, the most smooth transition for most of the animations we use in UI. So we'll use that, is hyphen in out. So basically you can see that it is working smoothly, and there's really nothing that we have to do, nothing advanced, everything is built in. So basically that's a very easy way to introduce good looking features into your website. And now we have this button active scale smaller than 1, so it should shrink whenever we press. And notice that it depends, that the shrink, the transition, takes some time. So it checks how long I'm pressing. So if I press for the whole duration, it goes into 0.9. But if I press quickly, then it will shrink only ever so little. This is a very subtle thing, but I think it gives to the responsiveness of the UI. 10% is a lot, so let's change it by 5%. It's okay. It's now alright. What is more? One more thing. Nobody really likes that whenever you hover over button, you don't see through your cursor that there is a possibility to press it. We have this, scale effect, but it's not everything. So let's add something called cursor property and give it pointer value. And right now, whenever we hover over, we will change our cursor to pointer. Also, again, depends on the OS, operating system you are using. So it will be different on Windows. It will be different on Mac OS. Probably you will have nothing on Linux, because you're probably, if you're watching that and using Linux, then probably you don't have this graphical desktop view. You only use terminal. Anyway, so we have that. We have this section with a few things. One more thing which I want to show you. Actually, we are not coding. We're not using JavaScript. We are not coding any functionality for that button, for any button, for that reason. But we will change the email button. It will be the only button that really does something, but technically we'll remove the button thing and we'll add something different. It will be a new tag, which is a pretty common one and useful. It's called simple letter A. Yes, the first letter alphabet, and it stands for anchor. We don't have to. I want to provide an email. We don't have to really write an email address here. I could write like email and then close this anchor point, save it. And as you can see, there is the anchor element doesn't work yet because it has no element. But the anchor element doesn't work yet because it has anchor tag links. It's a link, basically it's a link. So it links element that we are using, so that the content inside becomes a link. Whenever you press on it, it will direct you to anything that you specify within this A tag. But you need to use the property, which is href again. So mind you, the same href and the same ruling applies. So inside the quotation marks, if you specify something like that, it will be treated as a relative path. If you want some non-relative, like generic path, to, for example, website, you would have to put href and https and then welcome. Well, basically update, and now we have a working link, and it links to Google. See, basically actual Google, right? So, but we want to link to an email, and that's something that's a trick I want to show you. It's not really part of the CSS HTML, but because we are talking about it, we can do it anyway. So we can use so-called mail to flag, and then specify any email. And I wanted to give this email that I have in the mockup version, which is contact@redbull.com. And there's an email. And in order for that to look better, I'll do it like this. And it doesn't really look beautiful. So we want to add some styling to it, to this class. But before that, let's press on that link, see what happens. It forwarded me to mail, Google Mail, basically, because I have Google Mail, but it forwarded me to a website that's automatically assigned to my email. And for example, if you're using it on a mobile, it will forward you to the default mail browser, or basically mailing agent. For example, Gmail, or Mail on iOS devices, if that's your default. So it is very good thing to introduce those kind of links. So this mail too. There's also a telephone too, which is written differently, which whenever you press, it will automatically direct you, if you're using on the phone, obviously, it will direct you to call that number, which is also useful when you're making a website and want to add those responsive contact details. And it's something that's really not very hard to do, but it gives so much, it shows that you've put effort into polishing that project. So yeah, let's leave it like this. However, let's add a styling. We'll call it email, and something very subtle. We'll use margin bottom, let's give it 12 pixels. Yeah, it already looks nicer. However, it's not aligned well, so let's give it 16 pixels, and that's all right. Yeah, because it's the same as padding here. Sorry, not here. Well, more or less, it's aligned. All right, so now that we have done this part, let's look at what we also had here. Whenever we hover over those items, look like they look how they shine, basically. So let's add it. And for the moment we have one class applied to every element, but now we need to do something different, something separate. So how we approach that? Two ways again. One is combining classes, and the other is giving every element individual class. And while giving individual classes good in terms of organization of the elements, it can get pretty messy. So combining classes can be a way of minimizing the amount of code we have, which is also good, because the less code we write, the less code gets sent over internet. So the bandwidth, you have some bandwidth, and the less you download, the less resources you download as you open the website, the faster it loads. So basically, the less you write, the faster the website will load. So keep that in mind. So basically, the less code you write, the better technically the website can be. It doesn't work that way all the time, but yeah. So let's add classes, 3 classes for every cart item. And first will be so-called, I will call it white. However, technically, I don't really care about this class that much, because everything that I want to do, everything I want to apply to the cards is already applied. So I want to have a class that's only important whenever we hover over the item. So I will add the class white and use the pseudo selector hover, and I will not really use the normal class, and well, technically it will work still the same. What I want to do is I will copy this box shadow, I'll put it here in this hover class, but I will actually add a new shadow, and box shadow property works this way. We can add as many shadows as we want. So I will add yet another one, but I will just change the values slightly. So I will do it this way. I'll put 20 pixels here, 50 pixels here, keep it 8 and keep it at 20%. Add, and now, well, nothing will happen because it's not applied to any class. How to apply it? First of all, I want to add to this cart item, so I want to add this transition. I will copy it. So this property. Now when we go to our HTML, I will show you how to combine classes. And combining classes is something that some frameworks like Bootstrap or Tailwind, which are CSS frameworks, they use it all the time. Basically, they create those, let's say, atomic classes, as they call it, this atomic approach, and they allow you to combine the classes. I mean, they provide classes that you use in HTML, so you don't have to write the CSS files, but basically whatever you would write in the CSS, you would just do within HTML by combining some classes with abbreviation and stuff like that. If you are using Bootstrap or Tailwind CSS, on a daily basis, then that would be very natural to you to write code like CS1 and FL or 5 PR, whatever. I made those up, but basically it will be like this, and every abbreviation or code will stand for something, for some class that the framework has prepared. So we'll go into article 1, so the first one, and we'll go into this class, and after the name, look, I press space and I add white, and that's it. That's how you combine classes. So that's also why you cannot specify names that have card middle, for example. So it can be two words, because space is defines the end of the name of the class. You can use hyphens. You can use camel case, but you can't put 2 words, because otherwise you couldn't be able to combine classes. Because how would the engine supposed to know which one is the name of the class and which one is not? So 1 word card, 1 word white, and save. And now it works, right? So let's add more classes. And notice that although we introduced this class white, we've never used it. We only use it whenever the object is being hovered over, which is one way of doing that. Let's clear it a bit. All right, so let's add another one, which will be yellow. Also hover. here we'll add two properties. First of all, I will copy this one. We'll go like this, and the other will be setting background color as yellow. So technically, I have to add it here. So card yellow. Also, I haven't added class red yet. I will in a moment, but let's add it already into HTML and let's see if something happens. So this works. This works partially because as you can see, the effect is not the same as here. Here we have this glow effect, and I'll show you how to make glow effect in a moment. But let's see that whenever I hover over this one, nothing happens because I have only two classes applied, one of which doesn't exist yet. But if we go into inspect console, there are no issues. Elements. If we go into this thing, we see there is this class red, but this element, although the article class says it has red class, it doesn't have it because it doesn't exist. So that's one of the traits of CSS, HTML, JavaScript. You can really use elements that do not exist, but the code will behave sometimes not the way you want to. So you have to be careful about stuff like that. So you can try to address something that doesn't exist. Sometimes it will give you errors. In some cases, like here, it won't. So yeah, web dev uses strange languages that are governed with strange rules. Right, let's add this red over. Let's add this again. Background color red. No, sorry, tomato. Because I think it's better. Red is too harsh a color, and so it will work. But still, the shadow is. We have still the black shadow. And why I copied this one? Because we'll use the same shadow. However, the trick is in changing the color of the shadow to the value we want. So for example, this will change to yellow. This one will change to red. And I actually have already prepared some values of the colors because I don't really remember them by heart. So this will be 255 and 251 and 255, 251, and we'll set the same. This one will set to 0.5. Update. Glow effect. It does glow. But this one I didn't want to give it yellow. I want to give it FD FF78. So that's a color I already pre-assigned, and as you can see, it has a better look. It is glowing. Not everybody might want it to glow, but I just wanted to show you how to do it. So you can see those are the same elements, and the difference is only in the color of the shadow. So if you have black shadow, you will still have an element that has some color, but the shadow is, well, shadow. If you set the same color of the shadow as the background of the element, and it's like unique, yes, and also consistent, then you will see that it has this effect of a glow, halo, or bloom. Yeah, doesn't matter however you call it. So again, red we can actually, we could set 255, we'll set it to normal red, but this will be set to 5, and we have it. It glows. now let's do the other part, which is the this section with reviews, let's say. So this is the same. A slight difference between the mockup and the version we are working on. I set the cursor pointer for the whole element, and in this version we set it only to the button. I think in the button is better. It doesn't really matter. Whatever you want. You can do it as a exercise to add this cursor pointer effect to the whole item. You should probably already know how to do it. All right, so let's see how we can do the other sections. So we have one section already, and I will copy it just for a moment. I will add it here, save. And knowing how Flexbox works already, so I add this section inside the main element. Main has a class container, and when you look at container, it's flex direction column. What do you think? Where will those other three elements appear? Here on this side, so we'll have like 6 elements in a row, or underneath. Now we can actually see it's pretty nice grid. However, it's not something we want. So we'll delete those 3 articles, and also the section class. Not really. We don't want section class. We'll set it like this. Let's make this like here. So let's. Okay, it not looks like a professional ID. It doesn't fold or auto indent the column on its own, but well, better this than nothing, I think. Anyway, we'll call this one testimonials. All right, because those are testimonials. However you call it, I mean, that's the section, the class will be called testimonials. And we can actually copy this. And since we know already how to use class, mutual classes, multiple classes, we can create class called flex and flex row. And we will put, this one here, and we'll call flex, full stop flex column, and we'll put that. However, we'll change row to column. You can delete that because actually it turns out that the cards class does nothing except for doing. But for the sake of clarity, what element does what, we'll leave the class card, but we'll give it flex row. Then again, container is a flex column, so we can remove that. So container will be flex column. What else? Card uses something different, so this justify content will leave it. Those will leave. All right, but our testimonials will use flex row again, right? Because to have those 3 elements. Nothing changed because we only minimized the amount of code we have written. So now let's take a look at our testimonials, which we haven't introduced yet. Testimonials will be here. Testimonials. Actually, again, like cards, it will not add anything. So let's just create article. Article, it's not really article like blog post or something. It means that there is an item of a content, a piece of content. Article inside the section. It works like this. All right, so we have an article. We don't really need to call it article. We can call it like section, or soon we'll see how a generic division item is called, I mean the tag in HTML is called. So we'll use this article. We'll give it a class with name of testimonial, singular. We'll close it, close that, and close article. Save. But before we begin, here between the sections we want to add the h2, which is header but of the size 2, with the name of testimonials. h2, and we have testimonials. Well, it does look clean, I think. So we have this item, and what we wanted to do is we wanted to, let's have a look at our mockup. We want to have 4 elements, image, name, rating, and comment, description. So how do you think? I will give you 5 seconds to think of the layout of Flexbox, you know, this alignment that we'll use. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, time is up. If you said that we will use, first of all, column to divide the item into 2 sections. First will be the, let's say, header, and then description, then you're right. If you also said that the header section will have inside a row Flexbox, so dividing into image and then this part, then you're also right. Then we'll have again division into column, so Caroline, the name, will be above the rating, that's okay. And then the last, this section will also be Flexbox row. So basically we have column, row, column, row. Pretty nested layout, but let's jump into it. So I've used already article. I want something that doesn't really convey to bots, for example, that I'll have a blog post inside a blog post, inside a blog post, inside of a cookie dough recipe, inside of the listicle 5 reasons why you should wash your face before going to bed. No, I want a simple element that doesn't convey any message. And here enters div, the most beautiful element that will be, if you'll ever work with React, we'll be using div a lot. Div and span, 2 elements. Both convey no message, except div specifies that the elements above each other, or sorry, after each other, should be, for example, in different lines. So there is a line break between them. And when it comes to span element, there is no line break. There are inline elements, basically. So div, and well, technically, you can say like this: class equals to flex row, sorry, column. No, testimonials already has flex column. Then we'll have flex row, which will be the header. Right, so it will be a header, let's say header, and then we'll have the text, which will be in a P, which stands for paragraph. So here, let me just copy whatever I have written. All right, then close with P. Okay, saved. All right. Testimonial. First of all, width 300 pixels, padding 16 pixels, 32 pixels, margin 0 pixels, I don't really need a margin in the y-axis. On x-axis, we'll give it the same as we have on cards, which is margin 16, but they have 16 in both directions. Here we don't really need, because we want it to stick close to the testimonials header. So 16 pixels. Save. Better. Background. Color. White. Better. Box shadow. Basically, we'll take the same shadow as we have. Yeah, that one. Basically. I mean, well, it starts to. Actually, if you remove the color, it still works okay, but to be honest, I want it to be completely white. It's okay, really. So let's stick it like this. So now let's go into the header again. So we don't want the header to be like this. We have header row. So now we have divided it into, well, how many items we'll put, but in the row alignment. So we'll again create div item for division, class flex column, and this item, I have image here, there be dragons, but for the moment let's say it's an image, and we'll substitute image with h1 just hash for the moment. So just pretend that it's an image. Div column and one more. So we'll have name. I had Bruce, and then one more division class flex row, and we'll have 5 stars. That works. We'll just indent whatever there is to indent. So we need to add, obviously, that, right? And it works. It looks not really good, but it works. So in order to make it look like we want to, first of all, we want some image here. So in order to add an image, we'll remove that for the moment. We can use image tag. Basically, that's a self-closing tag. Image. We need some image, and you can use whatever you want, but there is a nice website which is called randomuser.me.photos, and basically whenever you refresh, you'll get a page full of random images. And what we want to do is we want one image of a man, let's say number 1, and when we open the graphic in a new window, we can get the image, I mean the URL, and we will use it as a source. So src equals to that. Basically, when we reload, we have it. Nice, but it looks bad. What's that? Okay. All right. So, image. We'll add selector. This time it will be image type selector. width 100 pixels. Was 100 pixels? Was it? Too much. 50. All right. And border radius technically we can set it to, we want to set it to half the height and width of the image, but we don't always know what's the width, and if we wanted to refactor the width to make it bigger, then we'll have to change the border radius if it was set in a fixed amount of pixels. So we can use this trick and set it to 50%. Look now, image basically, width and also height of 50 pixel. Just for the sake of clarity, it's the same. It was square anyway. One more thing, margin right 16 pixels, and that's it as far as images are concerned. One more thing, we want that to be aligned to left, to here. And the same actually applies to these. I want them to apply aligning to left. So we can create a new class. So we have flex row, flex column. Let's call it flex left. We can copy this. Sorry, it's a row. But instead of justifying content to center, we want to set it to left. One more thing is we need to set width to 100% at some point, because otherwise it will not work, because now it stretches to 100%. Without this width 100% it will not stretch, and it means it will be centered because of the parent element, if that makes sense. So now that we have that styling, we can apply H, let's say H3, it will be okay. All right. So now we have already something, and those stars. That's not really something you would include in a testimonial. So again, I will use outside resource, and this time I will use Google material icons. So I will show you how easy it is to use symbols like that. So we have those font.google.com/icons, right? And obviously I have found star. Two things. First one is we need to, three things actually. We need to take this style sheet, because basically whenever you find something, some item, some icon, let's say star, we can specify, customize how they look. So we take star, and then we need to take this link. So we copy it, use this button, and we put it in the header. Remember I mentioned at the very beginning that we will do something at the beginning, so we add that. Then we take this style, basically we can take this style and add it here, or, which I prefer, is take this rule set, this rule set, and add it to our CSS file at the end, probably. We hope that. Fill 1, yes, everything is good. And now the last thing is introducing those items, which is putting them here. Voila. Let's go to our page. Let's not close this one yet. We have a star. Nice. One more thing here, font variation settings. After that, after font variation settings, we put semicolon and then add color gold. And also we can do this stuff. And also, I'll leave it like this. And it's golden. Nice. So one more thing is, a few more things. This margin padding, basically alignment of the items, is terrible. So first of all, let's see what is the thing we need to change. H3 has a very high margin at the bottom, which we don't need. So if we wanted to change, we don't need that as well. If we wanted to change H3 padding, we'll do it like this. Sorry, padding margin bottom 0, right? But it would apply this change to every H3 heading. However, we could do it like this. Testimonials H3, meaning, sorry, full stop. All H3s, it should apply to all H3s which are inside testimonials. And it applies to this one perfectly. However, do we need the margin at the top? No, we don't. We'll set it to that. And yep, so we'll set it to 0 basically. And it's already looking better. And the star, we need what, 5 stars, right? So we will set, we need to copy this one, but let's set it as a 1 line, and let's copy it 5 times. And let's do it like this. This division is like that. Save. Nice. And one more thing is we want to change this text to slightly lighter gray. But again, if we changed, and also italics, if we change this font style to italics, it would apply to every item. Italic. Also this. We want it to apply only to the testimonials. So again, we'll set a full stop testimonials and then the P paragraph. So basically we apply to every P element, paragraph element that's inside testimonials class, which is this section, the whole section. And it's pretty useful to combine those selectors in order to achieve whatever you want. So we have the testimonials, and also let's specify the line height. 20 pixels, and also color of the text, slightly lighter shade of gray, and we'll go with 727272. Right, and it's already looking nice. Line height 26 pixels. Yeah, better. Let's change this one. Let's add left and align items to left. And now this class will apply to here. Column left. Okay, one more thing. We'll add another testimonial, and we had already one testimonial in this article here, so we just need to get this article and copy it here, and already it's working. Funny thing is that when we have the second article, we can, when you look at these URLs, so we now want some lady. We'll go into her graphic, and as you can see, we can copy this one, but look what changes. Only this word, so man or woman, changed, and the number. Let's set it to 1, and let's set this one to 1. So we've got one man, 1, and woman 1. JPG. So save. We've got now some images. Not Bruce, but Caroline. And yep. And basically that's it. We'll change this testimonial to something else. You can put whatever you want. Obviously, that's just an example. But I didn't want to put, this stupid lorem ipsum. I wanted something more, connected to actual human being, who is me. And our web page is looking something. But I promised you that I will show you how to do this infinite, let's say, tunnel or depth of a tunnel. So I'll show you how to do it in a second. First of all, we can't really collapse it, so we need to find where the main content item closes. Here we'll add another. We'll use section, or actually you can use div because we don't really care about that, and we'll close it with div. We'll give it a class of background. And this class, I will show you some new attribute. So background. Technically, we'll use flexbox as well, but just for the sake of it, I will write it. I will copy this flex from here. Row, can be row, it can be column, whatever. Just to have it here. We'll set it to width 100% and height again 100 with view heights, right? Nothing changed. Let's set the background color to something. Red, and update. Nothing. Why? Because our main element, we didn't save it. Okay. Yeah, so now we have one page full of whatever we've created, and then after that we have one page of pure red. Exactly one page, right? We'll use something called absolute position, basically positioning. For the moment, everything is positioned relative to each other. The things are stacked on top of each other. I mean, like in some kind of alignment and order. But what we want to do is we want to make the background independent of anything. We want it to stretch fully to full width and full height, and
also be independent, and also basically it's a background. It should be behind every element. So we'll have one problem which we'll soon see and solve. So we'll use this position attribute and we'll set it to absolute. Could use fixed also. There are a few properties we can use. Position absolute and set specify where is the top. So the by default left. We are now specifying where the element should start, should lay, as far as the top and left. So, well, basically one axis and the other axis, the horizontal and vertical axis are concerned. So we are using this position absolute, and then we specify the position in pixels regarding two axes, a horizontal and vertical one. Vertical to top and horizontal. And we specify from what side of the screen we start counting, basically. So now when we refresh, we see that indeed our background has covered every inch of our website. How can we solve this? There's a property called z-index, which we'll use here. We'll set the z-index to 1, but by default everything is 1. So we'll need to go to our main, so basically container, and set the z-index to 2. And that's not enough. We need to specify it that card is above, and basically testimonials as well. So testimonials done. One more thing, we haven't set really the background color. We didn't need to technically, but as you can see, the background is transparent, which looks really bad. And also when we'll have the infinite depth of our corridor, let's say, it will also look not really the best. So let's specify, use this background from container, so from our main element, and put it onto the card itself. And then when we refresh, the color doesn't change. So when we remove this ridiculous color, it doesn't change. It's the same color, but well, it is the same color. If we remove it and save, nothing changes. But also you can see that the image and the stars are imported, and also, you know, they load and they take a tiny amount of time to load. So they might be ready immediately, depending on, let's say, the latency, but sometimes may take, you know, a noticeable time for them to load. It's just a blink of a second, but still, sometimes you may notice that. All right, so we have done that, and now we'll do a trick. We'll create a new div, and we'll call it BG item, let's say, so background item, self close, close now div, and this background item, so BG item, will have first of all these, actually we can say this display, flex row, doesn't really matter, as you will see in a moment. But what we want is to put, and also we can remove that and set that to flex row. And there are two things. First of all, we want the content to get smaller, to
to fill only 80%. So we'll set width to 80% and height to 80%. That's one thing. And another thing is we'll set some border radius. And we'll set it to 16 pixels. And one more thing, box shadow. There is a property we can use, which is called inset. Inset property means that the shadow will go inside the element, not outside. So basically it will show this effect of hollowness, that there is a gap, a hole. And so basically we'll copy this one, paste it here, but make it inset. And it starts to look as a whole, basically. And now the trick is like this. We take this one and we copy it inside, and we copy it inside, and we copy it inside. And we follow up with, many iterations. And when you update, voila. So basically we have created an object that's 4/5, so 80% of the width and height. So it's getting smaller, but the rate it's getting smaller in fixed amount of pixels is also diminishing, so that it's not a linear change, rather because if we wanted to have a linear change, we could set it like this: 100% minus 100 pixels, but it doesn't work like this. However, we can make this calculation by setting it to calc. So there is this property in CSS that we can use. We can set it like this, save. And now we can see it's a linear change, and it looks crappy. However, wait, depends what you really prefer. If you prefer this way, so to have the change that is gradually, like a step, go for this one. If you want to have a kind of depth of a corridor, go with this non-linear change, basically. One last thing, which I have upon my sleeve, is to change the shade, the shadow, to some different color. And that different color will be basically, first of all, we'll change this alpha, and it will be slightly reddish, 61, and then a lot of blue. Update. Update. Kind of pinky, too pinky. 145. Save. And now we have this slightly violet vibe, but I think it looks clean, and it gives this slightly violet taste of the background, which looks like something that's plastic. I think there's this vibe of Apple products, of Apple UI here. So so it doesn't look like it's only a shade of gray. But well, basically, if you compare, that's what we wanted to achieve, and that's what we did in this course. So let's now have a look at our website again. So we have working buttons. We have implemented using images from outer source. We also implemented using symbols from Google Material UI icons. We have changed the default font. We have created many elements And also we have specified different sections. We've used semantic tags in HTML, so main, section, article. We have used division, generic elements, so divs. We have created our own classes, and we have created numerous basically selectors. If we go over our HTML, we can see somewhere there were those information. Okay, there is nothing like that. So we can see there are many lines of code we have written, many elements. We have written 122 lines of code in CSS, so many selectors really. We have used different types of selectors. We've selected through classes. We have used pseudo selectors. We have selected through generic items and tags like image. We have used combined selectors, so combining, selecting through element that's a child of some element that contains a class. So I have done really many things in this tutorial, and well, you can use those things that you have learned here, so using HTML and CSS, and start creating your own personal website with just, you know, some twist. You can add different headings, you can add different types of elements, cards, you can add animations, maybe more sections concerning different things. You can add links to different, you know, sub pages of your page. So basically, you know, the sky is the limit, as always. And but the most important thing is that you have gathered some basic knowledge, concrete knowledge about the stuff that you should really use in HTML and CSS, and that can be used when you want to work on JavaScript, especially when we have libraries like React, which use HTML and CSS on the regular basis. But in the course of React, for example, the one that I have also on my website, you don't really, and on other courses as well, you start with React stuff, and everybody expects you to know stuff about HTML and CSS. And well, where do you get this knowledge? And the question is answered with a really simple thing, and that's this actual course which you have completed. And for that I thank you. So if you like the course, feel free to comment, like, subscribe maybe, and yeah, see you in the next video. Thanks.